Emma Carter knew she was desperate, but she never imagined how far she would go to save her sister. When billionaire Alex Sterling offers a tempting deal, a child in exchange for financial security, she sees a chance to change everything. But as the two grow closer, dark secrets and betrayals threaten to tear them apart. With a manipulative assistant willing to do anything to protect her power and an abusive ex obsessed with control, Emma and Alex are forced to face their greatest fears. The monotonous beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in room 304 of Holy Cross Hospital. Emma Carter mechanically adjusted the thin blanket over her younger sister's shoulders, her fingers trembling slightly as she tried to ignore the deep dark circles that stained Sophie's once radiant face. "You need to stop looking at me like that," Sophie whispered, her voice hoarse but still maintaining that playful tone that had always characterized her. "Do I look that bad?" Emma forced a smile, swallowing the lump forming in her throat. "You? Never. Just need a little blush, maybe." "Terrible liar." Sophie tried to laugh, but the sound turned into a dry cough. Emma quickly reached for the water glass on the bedside table, helping her sister take a few sips. Her hand was shaking so much that a few drops escaped, staining the white coat of the uniform she still wore from her shift at the clinic. "Miss Carter," Dr. Matthews' deep voice echoed from the door, making Emma turn around. The oncologist stood in the doorframe, his expression carefully neutral. "Can we talk for a moment?" Emma felt her stomach sink. She knew that tone. It was the same one she used herself at the clinic when she needed to deliver difficult news. "Of course," she replied, leaning down to kiss her sister's forehead. "I'll be right back, Sophie." In the hallway, Dr. Matthews didn't waste time with preliminaries. "The latest tests weren't promising, Emma. The cancer is spreading faster than we anticipated, and conventional treatment is no longer being effective." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, her back finding support against the cold wall. "How long? Without more aggressive intervention?" 3 months, maybe 4. "And with intervention?" The doctor hesitated. "There's a new experimental treatment. Initial results are promising, especially in cases like Sophie's." A spark of hope lit up in Emma's chest. "Then let's do it. I'll sign any necessary consent forms." Dr. Matthews ran his hand through his gray hair, a gesture she had never seen him make before. "The treatment isn't covered by any insurance. And the cost?" "How much?" $800,000. The number hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. She had already worked all possible overtime at the clinic, sold her car, mortgaged the small apartment they shared. Even so, she could barely keep up with the current treatment bills. "There must be some way," she murmured, more to herself than to the doctor. "There's always a way." "Emma." Dr. Matthews gently touched her shoulder. "You've already done more than anyone could expect. Maybe it's time to—" "No." Emma straightened her shoulders, her voice firm despite the unshed tears. "I won't give up on her. Sophie is all I have left, doctor. Everything." The doctor nodded, resigned. "I'll leave the information about the treatment at reception. But Emma, don't take too long to decide. Time is a luxury Sophie doesn't have." When he walked away, Emma remained in the hallway, watching her sleeping sister through the room window. Sophie, who had always been the optimist, the dreamer, reduced to a pale shadow in a hospital bed. Sophie, who dropped out of college to help her recover after she finally managed to escape from Marcus. Sophie, who deserved so much more than dying at 23. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket, a reminder of the extra shift she was supposed to start in an hour at the clinic. A few more $100 that would barely make a dent in the mountain of debt she had already accumulated. "Forgive me, Sophie," she whispered, resting her forehead against the cold glass. "But I'll find a way. I have to." What Emma didn't know as she watched the sun set through the hospital window was that fate was about to offer an escape. Not through miracles or luck, but in the form of an unexpected proposal from one of the most powerful men in the city. A proposal that would change her life forever. While Emma faced her battle at Holy Cross Hospital, across town in one of Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods, another personal drama was unfolding in silence. In Dr. Richardson's luxurious office, Alexander Sterling watched the doctor examine his latest test results with an expression that tried unsuccessfully, to hide his concern. "Be direct, doctor," Alex finally said, his controlled voice masking the tension consuming him. "How long?" The doctor placed the papers on the mahogany desk, removing his glasses with a sigh. "If you want to have children, Alex, it needs to be within the next 12 months. The condition is progressing faster than we anticipated." Alex rose abruptly, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of Boston. Below, his corporate tower stood imposing against the morning sky. Sterling Tech, an empire he had built from scratch. Now at 35, when he finally had everything he'd ever dreamed of, his own body was betraying him. "The same condition that took my father," he murmured, more to himself than to the doctor. The bitter irony didn't escape him. After years of trying to prove he was different from William Sterling, he would end up sharing his same fate. "Alex," Dr. Richardson approached, his voice gentle. "Your father's condition was different. He refused treatment until it was too late. You still have options." The doctor hesitated for a moment before continuing. "One of the alternatives we could consider would be surrogacy. It's quite a common procedure nowadays." Before the doctor could continue, the office door opened softly. Victoria Shaw, Sterling Tech COO and Alex's right hand for the past 5 years, entered with her characteristic feline grace. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though her tone suggested the intrusion was perfectly calculated. "But we have that meeting with the Japanese investors in 20 minutes. Alex checked his watch. She was right, of course. Victoria was always right. It was one of the reasons she was indispensable. "We should discuss the alternatives," Dr. Richardson insisted, casting a meaningful look at Victoria. "There's nothing to discuss," Alex replied dryly, already adjusting his tie. "I won't leave Sterling Tech without an heir." Victoria remained silent during the entire ride in the private elevator, but Alex could feel her mind working. When they were safely in the privacy of the limousine, she, who is secretly in love with him, finally spoke, her voice softer than usual. "You know, Alex, perhaps the solution is closer than you think." She paused meaningfully, but faced with his silence, continued in her usual professional tone. "But if you intend to follow Dr. Richardson's suggestion about surrogacy, it's the most practical solution. No emotional complications, no need for a hasty marriage, no risk to the company." Victoria consulted her tablet. "I can have a list of suitable candidates by the end of the week, all with impeccable medical histories, above average IQ, appearance." "No." Alex cut her off, his voice sharp. "If I'm going to do this, it will be my way. No catalogs, no commercialization. It needs to be real," Victoria completed, with a slight tone of mockery in her voice. "Alex, you don't have time for romance. You need efficiency." He didn't respond immediately, his eyes fixed on the city passing by the window. Victoria was right, of course, as always, but something inside him rebelled against the idea of turning the conception of his child, his only chance to be a father, to leave a true legacy, into just another business transaction. "Find another way," he said. Victoria pressed her lips together, but nodded. "As you wish. But time is running out, Alex. And you more than anyone know that time is money." What she didn't say, but Alex could clearly read in her eyes, was that time was something he no longer had the luxury of wasting. In 12 months, he would need an heir. And for that, he would need a mother for his child. What he didn't know was that in a hospital across town, a young nurse was about to make a desperate decision that would change the course of their lives forever. It was that same night when Emma and Alexander's paths began to converge, though they didn't know it yet. While Alex returned to his penthouse apartment, mulling over the doctor's words, Emma walked the hospital corridors during her extra night shift. Her eyes, tired from the long hours of work, stopped at a discreet notice on the employee bulletin board. Wanted, surrogate mother for high-profile family. Generous compensation. Absolute discretion required. Under normal circumstances, Emma would have walked right past that notice. But that night, with the weight of the $800,000 needed for Sophie's treatment heavy on her shoulders, something made her stop. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote down the contact number. 48 hours later, Emma found herself standing before the imposing Sterling Tech building. The conference room on the top floor would have intimidated any ordinary person. She nervously adjusted the only formal blouse she owned, feeling out of place among all the glass and steel. Through the windows of the 50th floor, Boston seemed like a distant world, as distant as she felt from her normal life at that moment. "Miss Carter?" Victoria Shaw's soft but commanding voice brought her back to reality. "Mr. Sterling will see you now." Emma nodded, rising on shaky legs. In the last 48 hours since finding the discreet advertisement looking for a surrogate mother for a high-profile family, her life had turned upside down. The offered amount was exactly what Sophie needed, $800,000. Too much of a coincidence to ignore. Alexander Sterling was even more intimidating in person than in the business magazine photos. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. He observed her with penetrating blue eyes that seemed to read her soul. So he began, his deep voice filling the room. "You understand exactly what you're proposing to do?" Emma swallowed hard, but maintained steady eye contact. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. I've read the contract several times. And yet you're still here." It wasn't a question, but a statement laden with curiosity. "I am." Emma took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. "I need to be honest with you. I'm not here out of altruism or for the money itself. My sister is dying and needs an experimental treatment that costs exactly the amount you're offering." Alex leaned slightly forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Miss Carter, do you know how many candidates we've interviewed this week?" Emma shook her head. 17. All with degrees from elite universities, impeccable medical histories, brilliant references. He made a meaningful pause. None of them told the truth about their motivations. Victoria, who was observing everything from a corner of the room, let out a sound of disapproval, but Alex silenced her with a gesture. Why would a nurse from a community clinic, with no special connections or references, be any different? Emma felt the heat rise to her face, but maintained her composure. "Because I have nothing to lose by being honest, Mr. Sterling. My sister has 3 months to live without this treatment. If you decide I'm not suitable, I'll go back to my life and continue fighting for her as I've always done. But if there's a chance..." Her voice faltered slightly. "Well, here I am." The silence that followed was deafening. Alex stood up, walking to the window with his hands in his pockets. The setting sun tinged the room golden, creating an almost surreal aura around his silhouette. "Victoria," he said finally, "prepare the final documents. Miss Carter is our choice." Emma held her breath, hardly believing what she was hearing. Victoria, on the other hand, couldn't hide her surprise and disapproval. "Alex, we need to do more background checks, complete medical examinations." "Now, Victoria." The tone allowed no discussion. When they were alone in the room, Alex turned to Emma. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Miss Carter? Because once you sign those papers, there's no going back." Emma thought of Sophie, of her weak smile at the hospital that morning, of all the times her sister had been her strength when she couldn't move forward herself. "I am Mr. Sterling." She stood up, extending her hand. "And you can call me Emma." When he shook her hand, an electric current seemed to pass between them. For a fleeting moment, something beyond the professional agreement shone in Alex's eyes. What neither of them knew was that that handshake would seal much more than a business contract. It was the beginning of a journey that would change their lives in ways neither of them could imagine. The sound of Victoria's heels echoed through the hallway of the Sterling mansion as she led Emma through what would be her new home for the coming months. The guest house, as Alex had called it, was larger than the entire apartment where Emma lived with Sophie. "All your belongings have already been brought from your apartment," Victoria informed, her professional tone barely masking her antipathy. "The closet has been stocked with clothes appropriate for your new circumstances." Emma bit her tongue at the veiled comment about her simple clothes. Her thoughts were with Sophie, who still knew nothing. How could she explain to her sister that in less than a week her life had changed so drastically? "Your medical appointments begin tomorrow," Victoria continued, consulting her tablet. "Dr. Richardson will personally supervise the entire process. And naturally, we expect absolute discretion about..." "I'll take it from here, Victoria." Alex's voice interrupted the executive's monologue. He stood at the guest house door, his suit replaced by more casual attire that somehow made him even more attractive. But Alex, we still need to review the security protocols, and tomorrow. His tone was gentle but firm. Emma's had a long day. I'm sure she needs to rest. Victoria hesitated for a moment, casting a penetrating look at Emma before leaving. When they were alone, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. She doesn't like me, Emma commented, trying to break the tension. Victoria doesn't like anyone, Alex replied, a half smile softening his features, except maybe her own reflection in the mirror. The unexpected joke drew a genuine laugh from Emma, her first since this whole situation began. Alex watched her laugh, something indefinable passing through his eyes. How's your sister? He asked, surprising Emma with a personal question. Better, now that the treatment has started. Emma felt tears forming. I can never thank you enough for advancing the payment, too. No. Alex interrupted, his voice soft but firm. Don't thank me. It's a business arrangement, remember? But there was something in his tone suggesting that even he no longer believed that. Moving to one of the windows overlooking the main garden, Alex seemed lost in thought. My father used to say that business is like chess, he finally said. Every move must be calculated. Every piece has its value. Turning to Emma, he continued, but for the first time in my life, I can't see this as just another game. Emma felt her heart race at the intensity of his gaze. And is that bad? I don't know, Alex answered honestly, but I intend to find out. A noise from the main house broke the moment. Alex quickly recomposed himself, returning to his professional demeanor. Rest, he said, heading for the door. Tomorrow will be a long day. Alone in the luxurious guest house, Emma let herself sink into one of the soft armchairs. Her hand instinctively touched her still flat stomach, thinking about how her life had changed in so few days. Somewhere in that mansion, Alex Sterling probably had the same thoughts. What neither of them realized was that Victoria was watching the scene from the main house, her cold eyes calculating every interaction, every exchanged glance. On her tablet, a notification flashed. The results of the investigation into Emma Carter's past had just arrived, and with them, information that could change everything. The name Marcus Reed appeared several times in old police records. Victoria smiled, saving the file to use at the right moment. After all, as Alex himself said, every piece has its value in the game. Victoria remained in her office late that night, the glow of the tablet screen illuminating her face as she delved deeper and deeper into Emma Carter's past. Each new document she opened revealed more details about a story she knew she needed to use carefully. Police records, restraining orders, hospital reports, they all told the same dark story about Emma's relationship with Marcus Reed. But it was an old newspaper photo that really caught her attention. Emma, much younger and frightened, with visible bruises on her face, testifying against her ex-boyfriend. The sun was already rising when Victoria finally turned off her tablet, a plan forming in her mind. Meanwhile, in the guest house, Emma was waking from a restless night, her worries mixing with anxiety about her first day of medical examinations. Sleep well. Alex's voice surprised her when she stepped into the garden. He was sitting on one of the marble benches, a coffee cup in his hands, looking as casual in his running clothes as he would in a $1,000 suit. More or less, Emma answered honestly, accepting the cup he offered. Nervous about the test, I guess. Dr. Richardson is the best, Alex assured her, his gaze softening. He took care of my father for years before. He stopped abruptly, as if he'd said more than he intended. Emma felt the weight of the silence that followed. It must have been hard, she said softly. Losing your father. Alex stood up, walking to the edge of the garden. William Sterling was a complicated man, built an empire. But in the end, he turned to Emma, something vulnerable in his eyes. In the end, he died alone in a hospital bed, refusing treatment until the last moment. Why? Pride. Stubbornness. The belief that showing weakness was unacceptable. Alex gave a bitter smile. The same DNA that's condemning me now. Emma moved closer to him instinctively, touching his arm. "You're not your father, Alex. You're here, fighting, looking for a solution." Her touch seemed to send an electric current through him. For a moment, they stood there, too close for a purely professional arrangement, too distant to admit what was beginning to grow between them. "Mr. Sterling?" Victoria's voice cut through the moment like an ice blade. "The car is ready to take Miss Carter to the clinic." Alex pulled away as if he'd been shocked, recomposing his professional mask. "Of course. Emma, Victoria will accompany you today. I have an important meeting with investors." As she followed Victoria to the limousine, Emma couldn't help but notice the satisfied smile on the executive's face. Something about that smile made her uneasy. At Dr. Richardson's clinic, between examinations and consultations, Emma tried to push away the growing feeling that there was more at stake than a simple business arrangement. The way Alex had looked at her in the garden, the vulnerability in his voice when he spoke about his father. "Ready for the next test?" Victoria asked, interrupting her thoughts. There was something predatory in her smile. Emma, I was thinking it must be a relief to finally be free of all that nightmare with Marcus Reed." The name hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. How did Victoria know about Marcus? The panic must have been visible on her face because Victoria's smile only widened. "Oh, don't worry. Your secret is safe with me." She made a calculated pause. "For now." In that moment, Emma understood that she had entered a much more dangerous game than she had imagined. And Victoria Shaw had just made her first move. In the Sterling Tech office, Alex was reading the medical report on his desk for the 10th time, his thoughts continuously returning to the moment in the garden. What was happening to him? Why couldn't he get Emma Carter out of his head? What he didn't know was that soon he would have much bigger concerns than his growing feelings for the future mother of his child. Because Victoria Shaw was just beginning her game, and she played to win. While Emma tried to process Victoria's veiled threat, across town, in a discreet bar near the docks, another conversation was about to change the course of their lives. Victoria Shaw, impeccable in her Chanel blazer, seemed out of place in the modest setting. But her eyes gleamed with determination as she observed the man sitting across from her. Marcus Reed had changed since the days he terrorized Emma. Sobriety had restored some of his good looks, but his eyes still carried that disturbing intensity that had frightened his ex-girlfriend so much. "So," he said, spinning the glass of tonic water between his fingers, "after all these years, Emma finally managed to get ahead. A surrogate for a billionaire?" His laugh was bitter. "I always knew she'd end up selling herself." Victoria maintained her neutral expression, though inwardly she savored every word. "The arrangement is strictly professional, of course. But," she paused for effect, "I've noticed certain closeness developing between them." "And why exactly are you telling me this?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Let's just say Sterling Tech's interests need to be protected, and an emotional connection between Mr. Sterling and the candidate wouldn't be appropriate at this time." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "And what do you want me to do about it?" "Nothing drastic," Victoria replied smoothly. "Just remind Emma who she really is, where she came from." She slid an envelope across the table. "Your occasional presence in the right places will be well compensated." Meanwhile, at the Sterling mansion, Emma was sitting in the garden of the guest house, trying to calm her thoughts. The sound of footsteps on the gravel made her turn, expecting to see Victoria, but it was Alex approaching. "Is everything okay?" he asked, noticing her troubled expression. The tests are fine," Emma interrupted, forcing a smile. How could she tell him about Victoria? About Marcus? About the past she had worked so hard to bury? Alex sat down beside her on the marble bench, close enough for her to catch his subtle cologne. He began hesitantly. "When my father died, he left a letter. In it, he said his greatest regret was never trusting anyone but himself." Emma looked at him, surprised by the sudden confession. "What I'm trying to say is," Alex continued, "if there's something bothering you, anything." At that moment, Emma's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number made her blood run cold. "Miss me, darling? We need to talk about old times." "Emma?" Alex's voice seemed distant. "You've gone pale." She stood abruptly. "I need to check on Sophie." "Excuse me." As she rushed back to the guest house, Emma didn't notice Alex's worried gaze. What neither of them realized was that night, the first pieces of a dangerous game were beginning to move. A game where the price of love could be far higher than either of them was prepared to pay. Marcus's message continued glowing on Emma's phone screen, like a dark omen of what was to come. Her hands trembled as she paced back and forth in her guest house bedroom, painful memories flooding her mind like a whirlwind. Sophie immediately noticed something was wrong when Emma visited her at the hospital the next morning. "What's wrong, sis? You've got that worry wrinkle on your forehead." Emma forced a smile, adjusting her sister's pillow. "It's nothing, just tired from the test." But while watching Sophie responding positively to the new treatment, an icy fear gripped her heart. Marcus had always known how to destroy everything she loved. In the Sterling Tech office, Victoria observed with satisfaction as her plans unfolded. Marcus's presence was already affecting Emma. She could see it in the dark circles under her eyes and trembling hands during medical consultations. Alex also noticed the changes in Emma. During dinner at the mansion, he watched her push food around without appetite. "You don't have to pretend you're okay," he said softly. "I've noticed something's been bothering you for days." Emma looked up, meeting Alex's concerned gaze. For a moment, she felt an almost irresistible urge to tell him everything. About Marcus, about Victoria's veiled threats, about her past. But the words died in her throat when her phone vibrated again. "What a coincidence seeing you at the hospital today, darling. Sophie's looking better, isn't she? It would be a shame if something happened to her treatment." The message made Emma rise abruptly from the table. "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well," she mumbled, leaving a perplexed Alex behind. What Emma didn't know was that same night, Alex had his own demons to face. Dr. Richardson had called with the latest results. His condition was progressing faster than anticipated. Time was running out. Watching the city through his office window, Alex found himself thinking not just about the baby he needed to have, but about Emma, her hesitant smile, the strength she showed in caring for her sister, the vulnerability he sometimes saw in her eyes. When had that business arrangement turned into something more? Victoria entered without knocking, interrupting his thoughts. "Alex, we need to talk about Emma Carter." Her voice had a studied urgency. "There are some pieces of information about her past that you need to know." But before she could continue, a scream echoed through the mansion. Alex ran to the guest house, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Emma huddled in a corner of the living room, a bouquet of black roses fallen at her feet. Among the flowers, a card simply read, "Soon, my love, soon." Victoria's game was about to enter its most dangerous phase. And Emma knew, while feeling Alex's protective arms around her, that she could no longer hide her past. The question was, when the truth came to light, what would remain of her dreams of happiness? At the hospital, Sophie slept peacefully, unaware that her life and treatment had become pawns in a much larger game of power and revenge. And Marcus Reed, watching the Sterling mansion from his car parked across the street, smiled thinking about the chaos he was about to cause. In the days following the Black Roses incident, the Sterling mansion took on the atmosphere of a fortress. Alex had doubled security, installing new cameras and hiring additional guards. But no amount of security could protect Emma from the storm raging inside her mind. "You can't keep avoiding me forever," Alex said one morning, finding Emma in the garden. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed another sleepless night. "Whatever's happening, whatever you're afraid of, let me help." Emma turned to face him, tears threatening to spill. "You can't help Alex. Some demons, they need to be faced alone." "No." His voice was firm as he stepped closer. "Not alone. Not anymore." Without thinking, he reached out to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. The touch lingered, electric and intense. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Emma found herself lost in Alex's eyes, seeing not the powerful businessman, but the man who had slowly, inexorably begun to claim her heart. The man she couldn't allow herself to love. The spell was broken by Victoria's calculated interruption. "Alex, the board meeting?" Her sharp eyes took in the scene before her, a cold smile playing at her lips. "And Emma, you have a visitor at the hospital." Someone quite insistent about seeing you. Emma's blood ran cold. At the hospital, she found Marcus waiting outside Sophie's room, looking deceptively casual in his expensive new clothes, courtesy, no doubt, of Victoria's payroll. "She's looking better," he said softly, nodding toward the sleeping Sophie. "Amazing what proper medical care can do, isn't it? Be ashamed if something interrupted that care. What do you want, Marcus?" Emma's voice shook despite her effort to stay strong. His smile was predatory. "Just what's mine, darling. You. Or should I tell your precious billionaire about our shared history? About what you really are?" "She doesn't need to tell me anything." Alex's voice, hard as steel, made them both turn. He stood in the doorway, his usually composed face tight with barely controlled anger. Behind him, Victoria watched with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Alex," Emma started, but the words failed her as Marcus laughed. "Perfect timing," Marcus sneered. "Has she told you about her past, Mr. Sterling? About the restraining orders? About why she really needs that money for her sister?" "I know enough," Alex cut him off, stepping between Emma and Marcus. "I know about the police reports, the hospital visits, the fear you put her through." Emma stared at him in shock. "You knew?" "I've known for weeks. I was waiting for you to trust me enough to tell me." His eyes softened as he looked at her. "Nothing in your past changes who you are, Emma. Nothing." Marcus's face contorted with rage. "How touching. But did you also know that your precious Victoria here has been keeping me informed about every detail of Emma's new life? About your growing attachment?" The look of betrayal on Alex's face as he turned to Victoria was devastating. The COO's composed mask finally cracked. "Everything I did was to protect you, Alex," Victoria said desperately. "This arrangement was supposed to be business, nothing more. You're risking everything. The company, your legacy, your heart, for someone who has shown more integrity and strength than you ever have." Alex finished coldly. "You're fired, Victoria. Effective immediately." But Victoria's smile turned cruel. "Then I have nothing left to lose, do I?" She turned to Marcus. "Plan B. Now." Before anyone could react, Marcus pulled out a syringe. In the chaos that followed, Sophie's monitors began blaring their alarms. As medical staff rushed in, Emma watched in horror as her sister's vitals plummeted. "This is just the beginning," Marcus whispered before disappearing into the crowded hospital corridor. As doctors fought to stabilize Sophie, Emma felt her world spinning out of control. But this time, she wasn't alone. Alex's arms held her steady, his voice at anchor in the storm. "We'll fix this. Together. I promise." What none of them realized was that Victoria and Marcus's revenge was just beginning. And in the game they were playing, promises might not be enough to save everyone Emma loved. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of hospital rooms and police statements. Sophie had been moved to intensive care, but was slowly stabilizing. The doctors found traces of a powerful sedative in her system, evidence that could finally put Marcus behind bars if they could find him. Victoria had disappeared as well, leaving behind a trail of encrypted emails and suspicious bank transfers. Alex's security team discovered she had been planning this for months, carefully manipulating both Marcus and Emma's lives from the shadows. "She'll try something else," Emma said quietly, watching Sophie sleep in the ICU. "They both will." Alex squeezed her hand. "That's exactly what we're counting on." His phone buzzed, a message from his security team. They found them. An abandoned wing of St. Mary's Hospital. Victoria's been using it as a meeting place. Emma's heart raced. "What are we going to do? Spring their trap?" Alex replied grimly. "But this time, we'll be ready." Neither of them could have predicted just how desperate their enemies had become, or how far they would go for revenge. The abandoned hospital wing was a maze of shadows and echoes. Emma followed Alex's carefully laid plan, her heart pounding with each step. They knew Victoria and Marcus would be waiting. The question was where. The answer came in the form of Sophie, unconscious and hooked to portable medical equipment in what had once been an operating room. Marcus stood beside her, a syringe hovering near her for a line. One step closer, he warned, and she gets enough sedative to stop her heart. Victoria emerged from the shadows, her designer outfit incongruous in the decrepit setting. It didn't have to be this way, Alex. We could have handled everything quietly, professionally. But you chose her. No, Victoria. Alex's voice echoed as he stepped into view, police officers quietly positioning themselves at every exit. You chose this. Your obsession, your manipulation. It ends tonight. What followed was chaos. Marcus lunged for Sophie's IV. But Emma was faster, her nursing training kicking in as she knocked the syringe away. Victoria pulled out a gun, but found herself facing not just the police, but the full weight of evidence Alex had been gathering against her corporate crimes. In the end, it wasn't dramatic speeches or grand gestures that won the day. It was Emma's love for her sister, Alex's quiet determination to protect his new family, and the simple truth finally coming to light. In the weeks following the confrontation at the abandoned hospital, life began to find a new rhythm. Victoria and Marcus were arrested, facing various charges that would ensure a long stay behind bars. But for Emma and Alex, the real miracle was just beginning. Sophie recovered completely, her experimental treatment showing results beyond the doctor's most optimistic expectations. On a sunny spring afternoon, while watching her sister laughing in the Sterling Mansion's garden, Emma felt the baby's first movements in her womb. Alex was by her side in seconds, his hands gently touching her growing belly, his eyes shining with an emotion that words couldn't express. I never imagined a business deal could change my life so much, Alex whispered, softly kissing Emma's forehead. And I never imagined I would find love when I needed hope the most, she replied, leaning against his chest. Elizabeth Sterling was born on a starlit autumn night, a girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's sweet smile. Alex, holding his daughter for the first time, finally understood that his true legacy wasn't in the companies he built or the empire he raised, but in the love he found when he least expected it. The wedding took place when Elizabeth was 6 months old, an intimate celebration in the Sterling Mansion's gardens. Sophie, radiant in her bridesmaid dress, cried throughout the ceremony. Emma had never looked more beautiful, her white dress flowing like a silk waterfall as she walked toward the altar with little Elizabeth in her arms, dressed in a delicate dress that matched her mother's. Alex, for his part, could barely contain his tears as he watched his two women walking towards him, his usually serious face illuminated by a smile that his employees swore they had never seen before. Sterling Tech flourished under new leadership, more human and conscious. Emma continued her work as a nurse, but now running a foundation that helped women victims of domestic violence rebuild their lives. Sophie graduated from medical school, determined to give back all the help she received. One quiet night, while rocking Elizabeth to sleep, Emma found a folded note in her old nurse uniform. It was the original surrogacy contract, never signed. Alex had kept it as a reminder of the day fate decided to play Cupid with a lonely billionaire and a desperate nurse. Some contracts, Alex said, embracing her from behind as they watched their daughter sleep, are written not with ink, but with the heart. Emma smiled, turning to kiss him. The price of love, she had learned, couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. It was calculated in smiles, tears, moments of courage, and acts of faith. And in the end, it was worth every penny that never needed to be paid. In the Sterling Mansion's gardens, where everything began, a new family blossomed, proving that sometimes the best deals are those that the heart makes when reason isn't looking. What would you do if you were in their shoes? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out the next video. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching.